Hello, everyone. Welcome to Washington Gun Law TV. I am Washington Gun Law President William Kirk. Thanks for joining us. Hey, perhaps the single greatest subject that I discuss most with people who call into Washington Gun Law is restoration of Second Amendment rights. We know that there are ways that we can lose our Second Amendment rights. The most common way, of course, is through criminal convictions. All felonies and certain misdemeanors can, in fact, forfeit your Second Amendment rights. But for many of us who want to once again become the lawful and responsible gun owner, there is a way to get those rights restored. We're going to be starting a series of videos rather than do one very long-winded, boring video. We're going to break this down into a series of short, digestible pieces. You will find a video that fits your category so you can learn what you need to do to once again become the lawful and responsible gun owner. I figured that perhaps the best way for us to really get an understanding of what does a person go through when they have to restore their firearm rights is to talk to somebody who actually had to restore their firearm rights. And in a moment, we're going to be joined by actually one of our viewers, Brian. Brian, who was kind enough, actually reached out to us to say, hey, I've been through this, and was kind enough to sit down and talk to us about his experience, and he's going to share it all with you. Why is this all important? Well, this is really important also because, as you may be aware, Washington Gun Law has launched a new website to help you folks out there who want to once again become the lawful and responsible gun owner. That's getmyrightsback.com. Again, that's getmyrightsback.com. We'll talk about that more in a little bit, but for now, let's hear from Brian. Okay, everyone. Well, hey, listen, I want to thank Brian for joining us. Now, listen, Brian is a huge, big supporter of Washington Gun Law Channel. So, Brian, I do want to thank you for that. And just so we're clear, Brian is not your real name. We're going to use an assumed name for today. Is that okay with you?
That works for me.
Okay. Brian, you and I have had a chance to talk several times, and you are a much different guy today than you were several years ago. So why don't you tell our listeners here a little bit about some of the problems you got back into a number of years ago, primarily brought on by drug issues?
Yeah, so as a younger man, I got into some drug use that resulted in a fair amount of criminal charges being brought against me. And after my DOC custody time, I got out, and I had already decided that I did not want to return to that lifestyle. So I made the changes that I needed to make for myself personally. My number one rule was don't mess with anything that will prevent me from going to work. And the rest of it kind of fell into place.
Looking back on that time, what sorts of offenses did we gather during our time of addiction?
Possessions, deliveries, forgeries, burg seconds, and theft ones.
Okay. Very typical types of crimes that we see for people who are really stuck in that horrible web of addiction. All of these were felony offenses, though, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you mentioned that you did some DOC time. And so for our viewers, DOC time, that's not jail time, that's prison time, right?
Correct.
And do you mind telling us how much time you did?
It was a 100-month sentence.
A 100-month sentence. You served about what, 2/3 of that?
Yeah, about 5.5 years.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So you get out of DOC custody and you kind of make this determination that I'm going to start writing a new chapter in my life. We get sober, you get your feet back under you. And when did you get out of prison? What year did you get out of prison?
2008.
2008. When did you begin to start thinking about, it might be time for me to restore my firearm rights?
About 2015.
Okay. And was there anything other than just the general desire to have your Second Amendment rights back, or what was it that really kind of prompted you to start going down that road?
I grew up on a farm. We lived an outdoor lifestyle, a lot of hunting, a lot of just going out and plinking and having fun. And I had kids of my own at that point who were getting older, and that was an experience that I wanted to be able to share with them.
Okay. So when you first thought about getting your rights restored, knowing that, you had put in several dents into your criminal history as a younger guy, were you at all leery that this might be an impossible task?
I I think I had a pretty good understanding that there was a way to go about it. It was very unclear to me how to do so, though. When I got online and did a little bit of research, it looked like there was a way to restore them via the state, but no way to restore them federally. And by my understanding, since the background checks would run through the federal system, it seemed to me that maybe that was a counterfeit promise on behalf of the state. And I didn't quite know how to proceed without contacting an attorney.
Sure. And so for our viewers out there, what Brian's talking about is when we have to get our rights restored, we have to get them restored not only on the statewide level, but we also have to get our firearm rights restored on a federal level. And if we fail to do that second part, the problem is that locally a person can still be granted CPL status. I've seen people actually granted CPL status, but then they walk into an FFL to purchase their new gun, and when they fill out their 4473, things don't work out well and the sale is rejected. So that was an issue that you were aware of. Is that right, Brian?
Yeah, I think by my understanding, the bigger problem was that I could have my firearms restored by the state, but federal authorities could still possibly use my past against me. And what I didn't understand was that pertained more particularly to federal charges as opposed to state charges.
Okay. So what we're going to be talking about a little bit in this ongoing series here is RCW 9.41.040, which not only outlines all of the ways that we can lose our Second Amendment rights, but it also outlines some of the procedures for how we can restore our Second Amendment rights. Now, Brian, you decided after you did your own research that it was probably you're going to need the assistance of an attorney. Is that right?
Yeah, I felt that that was the best way to move forward. I had gotten online and actually paid for and received a packet of legal paperwork from an outfit out of King County, and I forget their name. But after delving into that paperwork, I felt a little overwhelmed by it. And this was not a process that I wanted to make a mistake in, because I didn't know at the time if I messed it up, if I would have another opportunity to file the same motion again. And, from my perspective at the time, I was also concerned that if I do this incorrectly and then get caught with a firearm down the road, what happens to me?
Right. And you didn't want to go back into DOC custody having already been there once before, right?
Yep, enough's enough.
Okay. So we get an attorney. Now, I understand you live kind of up in the North Puget Sound region, kind of up north of Skagit County. And so you got a local attorney up that way to assist you with this process. Is that right?
That is right.
Now, the attorney originally told you a time limit as to when you could do this. Is that right?
That was another attorney that I had contacted about 3 years previously, and then she was unavailable when my 10 years, as she described to me, had finally elapsed.
Okay.
So I contacted this second attorney.
So you had originally called an attorney to say, hey, listen, I want to restore my firearms. I know there's this period of time that I have to go and I have to be a good boy and nothing can happen to me during that time. And that attorney told you that the time limit was
10 years due to a Class B felony.
Okay. And that's the important thing is that you were convicted only of Class B felonies, because we know under 941.040 that Class A felonies are not eligible to restore from, correct?
Correct.
Okay. But you later learned that 10-year window that the original attorney had told you was actually not 10 years in length. What was the actual length?
5 years.
Yeah.
And on top of that, it was 5 years from the offense, not 5 years from my release, which she had led me to believe that my 10-year clock started from.
Okay. So where you were eligible under 941.040 for a little Roman numeral 2 big A, which is where we have the felony restoration work, you were told that it was 10 years from the date in which you completed your sentence. Now, you mentioned you had a 100-month sentence to serve. You served about 2/3 of it. So the sentence plus the extended waiting period actually meant that by the time you started this process, you had actually been eligible for several years, hadn't you?
Yeah, I wish I would have known that in retrospect.
Okay. But we are restored now. That's the important thing. So moving forward, everything is good. Now, one of the first things, and I do this with people who call me for restoration work, is I will order what's called the Washington State Patrol Watch Report. And what that is kind of the official record of everything that you have done as a defendant here in the state of Washington. And I heavily rely on it when I'm speaking with people such as Brian, when we're doing a consultation about restoration, because I want to make sure that A, can I really help this person? B, are they in the have they met the required time period? And C, how complicated of a restoration process is this going to be? And depending on the complexity of the watch report, will kind of determine the complexity of the restoration process. But Brian, you had far greater complexities in yours. What were those?
So there was another individual from the King County area who had evidently used my name as an alias during his DOC intake, and somehow there was confusion, and Department of Corrections entered into Washington State Patrol's database either my fingerprints with his name or his fingerprints with my name. And as a result, his name was listed as an alias of mine, and one of his charges was on my record.
Fantastic. Okay. So before you could even get started on the restoration process, we had to first make the records accurate so that Brian could restore from a correct set of facts and not other offenses that Brian had never committed. Agreed?
Yep.
Okay. So how long did it take you guys to clear that watch report up so that it accurately reflected only the crimes that you had committed?
That probably took me a month and a half to 2 months, and I was on the phone with Department of Corrections every day. I was on the phone with the Washington State Patrol probably twice a week. The gal that answered the phone down there knew me by name. It really took a while. I will say that the State Patrol was very helpful in getting through that process. They were very amicable. Department of Corrections, maybe not so much. I got a lot of, that's not my department, call this number, and then the same response there.
Well, and for our viewers who are unfamiliar with the Department of Corrections, they are good at many things. Customer service is not one of them. They're not really in the business of customer service, however. Okay, so we get this watch report finally cleared up. And I understand that one of the ways they were able to prove that you could not have committed some of those offenses that apparently somebody else had put onto your record is that you were in Department of Corrections custody at the time that those incidents supposedly occurred, right?
Correct.
Okay, so you had an airtight alibi that was given to you by the good folks at the state of Washington.
As good of an alibi as it's going to get.
Okay, all right, so we finally get the watch report cleared up. Now we're operating from a true, honest set of facts. From the time you guys began that process of restoring, how long did it take until your rights were restored on the state level?
So it happened very quickly. I would think 2 to 3 weeks. I had signed paperwork from a judge, and I contacted one of my local FFLs, and he encouraged me to wait about a month from that point forward before I attempted to complete a background check.
And the reason it's important to wait a month is, and this is for our viewers, is that once your rights are restored, that information is transmitted to the Washington State Patrol. But then the Washington State Patrol is under a statutory duty to then transmit it to both the ATF and the FBI, correct?
Yep.
And as we know, they run this very large federal database, NICS, NICS, and every FFL in the state of Washington is going to run a NICS check on you when you go to purchase a firearm. Right?
Yep.
Okay. So if we get our rights restored on the statewide level, like you did, and immediately run out to Cabela's to go buy a gun, we're in all likelihood going to run into a problem once they do the background check because the federal records have not caught up with the state records yet. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. So you waited about a month. Do you remember exactly how long you waited?
Probably not much more than a month. I was pretty eager at that point.
Okay. All right. So you go in, and we don't have to name the FFL, but you go in to actually purchase a firearm. Is that right?
Yep.
Any complexities, any difficulty in completing the paperwork, passing the background check, anything in getting that firearm?
So I will say the FFL that I went to was the same FFL that I had been open about my situation with earlier and had asked me to wait about a month. He did take a copy of the order from the court. I don't believe that that was absolutely necessary, but it made him feel better and I didn't mind. Uh, every background check I have ever gone through on the next level has been delayed. So where most folks can go in and pick up a shotgun or a bolt action style rifle same day, I cannot. I've been waiting since December 11th on a Remington 870 at a local sporting goods store. And that's just part of the process for me at this point. But I'm okay with that.
How many, since you've been restored, approximately how many firearms have you purchased?
Probably a dozen.
Okay. And you've been delayed on all 12 of those?
Yes.
But have you
Yep.
ever been rejected for a sale on any one of them?
Nope.
Okay. And you now have a concealed pistol license as well.
I do.
And was there any delay or difficulty with you obtaining that?
Only due to the COVID and BLM and everything else that was going on at that time in society. The waiting list was over a year, and I did not apply until after I had received my court order from the judge reinstating my rights. Had I known what I know now, I probably would have applied for that about 4 or 5 months earlier, knowing that I would have that paperwork by the
Right.
time that I got there.
Okay. So Brian, a couple of final questions for you. I sometimes I see people call me, and a lot of people call me and they want to talk about restoration work, and they ask the question of, well, can I do this myself? Now, you had contemplated at some point perhaps trying to do this yourself. What would you tell to our viewers out there who are contemplating trying to do this work for themselves?
I think that it's absolutely doable. For me, I think the biggest hangup was not having a format for the paperwork and a very clear cut and concise order of operations for how to go about that. There is the preliminary paperwork that goes in before the motion actually goes in. There's the request to get on the docket. All of those things have their own format. And I know that that format can vary a little bit from locality to locality,
Right. Right. It's the procedural mechanisms by which you get this done that attorneys can sometimes have a really good knowledge of, because the law, as we talked about already, is fairly straightforward when we're trying to restore from previous convictions, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and I know that paperwork can change from one county to the
Right.
next. The stuff that happens in Pierce County does not look like what happens in Skagit County, even if it's the same motion.
Exactly. That's very true. Very true. Couple final questions for you. Number one, I talk to people all the time who, very similar to you, they got into a tough spot when they were a younger person. They beat the hell out of their criminal record, and they think that there is no coming back from this. What would you tell those people?
There absolutely is coming back from it. There was a point in my life where I had essentially resigned myself to the idea that incarceration and solitude was going to largely be life for me. And I didn't have many aspirations beyond that. I'm glad that I got out of that headspace. And here I am today. I've got a lovely wife, 2 children that I love with everything I got.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really been a full circle trip for me.
That's awesome. And so for those people who think, hey man, I did a bunch of stupid things when I was younger, I'm never going to get my gun rights back, what you would say to them is
Push forward. By all means, consult an attorney to find out if it's even feasible. If you know beyond a shadow of a doubt that it's feasible, that you don't have any charges that would restrict you from being able to apply for those rights, doing it yourself is absolutely an option. I would try to make friends with the court clerk and see what you can come up with for the correct legal paperwork in that jurisdiction.
That's awesome. Well, Brian, just a couple closing comments here. First of all, I want to thank you for agreeing to participate. Now, for those of you who don't know, Brian actually contacted me and said, hey, I've actually been through this process, and we started kicking this idea around. So I really appreciate your candor and being here and taking ownership for what you did as a young man. But I also want to commend you, because I can't tell you, as being a criminal defense attorney for 21 years now, how many people get into a rough spot and they let that situation end up defining them for the rest of their lives. And it's such a refreshing change to see people such as yourself who take ownership, but then take the necessary corrective measures to turn their life around. You're doing really well now. You're a productive member of society, and I think you should be commended for that. So I wanted to personally say congratulations.
I appreciate that as well.
All right. Thanks for your time, Brian. I appreciate it. Well, I really want to thank Brian for all of his candor, and I do want to commend him for taking all the initiative to get his life turned around and once again become the lawful and responsible gun owner. Listen, if you got any questions about this issue or anything else related to your Second Amendment rights, you can always contact us at WashingtonGunLaw.com, or, of course, you can call us directly at 425-765-0487. Now, listen, if you made a mistake somewhere in the past and you lost your Second Amendment rights, and it's finally time to once again become the lawful and responsible gun owner, then visit us at getmyrightsback.com to see how we can help you out. That's getmyrightsback.com. In the meantime, let's all remember that part of being the lawful and responsible gun owner, like we talk about all the time here at Washington Gun Law, is to know what the law is in every situation and how it applies to you in any instance that you may find yourself. Until next time, thanks for watching, and stay safe.